So today I'm going to tell you about a commission that I took called the Map Project for some clients of a decorator. Um, the clients live in Connecticut, and we connected through a ribbon store in Manhattan. The decorator's clients wanted to hang a wall hanging over their bed. They were getting their whole house redecorated, and the bedroom was the current project. So the owner, I was teaching at NYU, so she was wandering around the city shopping and this and that and the other, and she saw a window display at Mokuba in Manhattan, Mokuba Japanese Ribbons, and she liked the arrangement of the ribbons on this grid pattern and thought it looked like a map of the world with the continents hanging on the grid. And she asked them if whoever made that would make a piece for their house, and the answer was no. So it just happens that I had these two pieces, Turks and Caicos and Curacao, hanging at the Omni Gallery in a show. And one of these pieces was used on the postcard for that show. And as it happens, just before this client, would-be client, uh, came into Mokuba to ask her a question, I had left this postcard with the owners at Mokuba, and they suggested I be contacted as a possible artist to provide them with their map project. So the decorator contacted me and invited me up to see the location. And we discussed the fact that they wanted something that I had never done before, something they had never seen before, and to interpret a map of the world. So this is the bedroom. The clients are displayed on the bed, and the decorator is standing with his back to us. They were replacing the bed with a lovely upholstered bed frame and a beautiful bedspread, which you will see later on. And I was to fill up that wall above the bed. So my initial reaction was that there are so many other artists doing things that would be suitable for this, embroiderers and quilters, and I was wondering why I'd been invited to participate. But I just started working and put ideas on paper and started experimenting with techniques and keeping the client informed as to what I was doing, sending them pictures every once in a while. We hadn't decided if it was one big piece or if it was going to be smaller pieces. I got lots and lots of ideas. So initially, I tried to find out if I could do what they had seen in the window at Mokuba at the ribbon store. It was a metal frame that had flat flanges on the front and the back, connected um, kind of a U shape, and they had strung wires between the edges to make a grid, and that's where the ribbons were hung. But it would have eaten up the entire budget of the project for me to get that frame built. So I let the clients know, and they said, that's okay. Go ahead and see what you can do. So I started sketching. I don't usually carry sketchbooks and notebooks with me, but I started to for this project. And you can't read my writing. I can barely read it myself, but I was making notes, outlandish notes and practical notes and sketches. I thought maybe I would have little call outs showing what flora and fauna were found in certain places. Maybe I would have cartouches in the corner showing the name of the map maker and the location and things like that. Maybe I would do it in two pieces or three pieces. maybe 4 pieces, maybe 6 pieces. So I just kept sketching, letting them know what I was working on, trying to make, here I'm trying to make triaxial weaving work. Um, Looks kind of like a dinosaur to me in the middle. The idea was that I would have land masses and I would outline them with water, and I don't know. It was an early idea that didn't pan out, but I kept making samples and making notes. In this one, I have a little bit of plain weaving on the sides that represent little villages and buildings. I have some loosely woven ribbons over here that would indicate water. At this point, they're just pinned in place. Um, Again, just trying out ideas. Eventually, the designer sent me an elevation drawing of the bed. So the mattress is in the middle, and the parts around the edges, the top and the bottom, are upholstered in a gold upholstery fabric, which you will see later. So this gave me dimensions. I had to fill the space, not entirely between the nightstands, but over the bed as much as I could, and keep it above the bed. So they had some room, I guess, to lean to read, to lean against the wall. So here again, trying to make triaxial weaving work, trying to do some knitting or some crochet work, trying to make continents and water. Um, More experiments triaxially. Borders. The little checkerboard ribbon reminds me of the side of a map sometimes where they have the scale marked on the map. Um, so I kept trying and trying. More sketches, getting a little more abstract, writing down base fabrics, rendering with elastic tape, couching, blanket stitch, trying to think about embroidery on this. And then one day I was playing around with some hardware cloth. You can see in the background here, it's a metal grid. This one happens to be a 1/2 inch metal grid of galvanized steel used for fencing and rabbit cages and things like that. And I started weaving the ribbons and trimmings in and out of this hardware cloth, trying to make landforms and lakes and rivers. And then the ocean, the light blue towards the bottom is the ocean, which just plain weaves in and out, alternating like a brick stitch. And I decided that this was going to be the technique I wanted to use. And at the time, the only black fabric I had on hand was some fusible interfacing. So that represented outer space, which I was going to use black velvet to do outer space. So it'd be deep black space. And I wrote them a letter. I had just moved into a new studio that had lots of wall space. And I wrote them a letter saying, this is the technique I want to do. And see, that was in July of 2004. So I had first met them in March. So I'd been working for several months on these samples. And they said, go ahead, we like the technique. And so then it became dividing up the space. And I knew that one large piece was going to be too big. I wouldn't be able to handle it, to hang it. It'd be hard to transport in my station wagon. So I decided that I would make 3 pieces that would be 2 different sizes, the outer ones being a little narrower than the inner one. And then it was a matter of this is a planet with 3 different views. Whether it would have rings or not, I hadn't decided, but just again, getting more ideas down on paper. I just dispensed with the rings, the Saturn rings. And they decided they didn't want to have black velvet over their bed in the bedroom, so I had to come up with something else to represent space. But this is roughly, I've got dimensions 54 inches high, 36 inches wide in the middle, 24 inches wide for each of the side pieces with about 3 inches in between. So this was the final sketch, and I started assembling my materials. I had to get canvas stretchers to hang the hardware cloth on, and find lots of ribbons that would represent land masses, different geological things, mountains and streams and pastures and lakes, and looking for textures. So here's the beginning. The piece that you see on the wall was the piece that I started working on when I got the idea uh, back in July. And I had lots of wall space. I could hang the pieces, and I figured I'd better work on all three of them at the same time. So I got all the stretchers and all the hardware cloth, and I cut it to size. And you can see on the left, there's a few of my samples leaning against the wall, just for reference for my own sake. And I decided, since I like to document my work, I decided to keep samples of all the materials that I used. And at some point, I decided I should have identical books for the client and for myself. So I made two books, two notebooks. I had the notebook with me at the meeting when I did this live at our meeting, but I keep my own. They have theirs, and if anybody wants to see it, when you're visiting my studio, I'll be happy to show it to you. So I filled up 4 pages. These are like pages that you would put slides or photographs on. So I just slipped in little snippets of the materials and wrote down the source for each material. And here I have all the stretchers put together, and I have all the hardware cloth cut to size. This hardware cloth has a green coating on it. That's why it looks dark against the wall. And we decided on a yellow watered silk for the background. So I purchased several yards of that so I would have it ready. And I started building the 3 pieces. I would take large, like wingspans, spread out my arms a couple of times to have a double wingspan, and I would knot up the yarns and threads together, and then I would poke them through the holes in the hardware cloth and make loops and work my way around the surface that way, keeping the ocean areas and the large lake areas flat. So I just kept building them and building and building and building. You can see near the floor on this one, I have a sample of the bedspread that has the dark orange background and the light beige leaf pattern on it. That's the bedspread. And I think the fabric to the right of that is the cover on the bed. It doesn't look very golden there, but it was pretty gold colored. So you can see here on the left a whole bunch of my materials. I have organdy ribbons, I have chenille, yarns, other fabrics that I cut in strips, all kinds of things that I collected. And as I finished, I had to turn each piece over to the back and tie up all the loose ends. I had to stitch them down so they wouldn't pop out. So in most cases, I had left a chunk hanging out in the back so I could find them, but I did some searching and some pulling and prodding so that I'd make sure I tied down, stitched down all the loose ends. And then I picked a border to sew around the edges to cover these stretchers. So I didn't want those to show. So here are the 3 pieces, all ready to be delivered. or almost ready to be delivered. It's not quite what I ended up with, but um, the silk in the background, and three views of a planet. So I moved the little one up at the top. I think I moved that a few times, um, and fastened it down. So here they are. You can see the bed, you can see the bedspread, and you can see the happy customers. I installed it for them, knowing that I might have a show of all the samples. As I was working on the samples, I was showing my framer every day what I was working on. And at some point she said, I want to have a show of the samples, which meant I had to make all the samples look finished, not rough, in order to do the show. And the clients here told me I was welcome to borrow the pieces back for my show, which was very generous of them. So you can see in this picture, they don't have their wall sconces yet. There's a lot of patches on the walls. The paint is not the final color, but they were so happy that they paid me more than the budget. So this is the invitation for the show. I decided that since this was a map project and there was a lot of water involved, I wanted to use a quote about water on the invitation. So I have an excerpt from The Hunting of the Snark by Lewis Carroll. I don't know if any of you know it, but it talks about a map of the sea that was a complete and absolute blank. And it was one that the men could understand, as opposed to having Mercator's projections, which have little parts missing. I don't know if you remember what a Mercator's projection is, but it's not round, it's not flat. It has points at the top and bottom to make it look as if it would go into a globe surface. Anyway, so we mounted this show, and it ran for a month in October of 2005. So if you remember back to the beginning, I started this in March of 2004. And I delivered it to them in the spring of 2005. So I spent more than a year making the project, and then I had this show. So here are some of the samples that I did, all finished up and framed and matted. Two continents and fifth planet. Here are some of my cartouches, which the clients didn't want any cartouches. So I made the cartouches with ribbons and trimmings and the backs of clothing labels, which in some cases have very interesting marks on the back of them. If you start looking at the backs of your clothing labels, you might see some of that. The show, here's my idea to put little flora and fauna with arrows showing where you found them on the map. That's flora and fauna. Provence is an aerial view flying over the south of France with a main highway and some little wiggly roads and a little village and some fields. It's my interpretation. During the summer of 2004, I went to Penland School of Crafts for a knitting class. It was called Artful Knitting. And all the students thought we were going to be doing art projects, just using knitting as our medium. And that was not the teacher's intention. So she wanted us to learn how to make patterns and design clothing in an artful way. But her first project was to have us dyeing yarn with Kool-Aid in the microwave and then dyeing yarn with fiber reactive dyes. So on the piece here on the left, I found a stitch in a knitting book that looked like waves and water. So I used that for my map of the sea that's a complete and absolute blank. And on the sides, on the borders on this, all my classmates gave me samples of their yarns to use in this piece. So all the different colors are from my classmates. The second piece on this page, I learned how to do some stitches to make relief by picking up stitches in the back of the knitting several rows below. So that makes a hump in the knitting. So if you do that, I made the mountains in that way. Here's the finished project at the show, hung over the stairwell. Nice place for it. Two more of the samples. Well, the one on the left has the black velvet that they didn't want, but it's very much the technique. And then on the right, we have some crocheted water and land masses for Peninsula. Because this was called the map show, the maps for the map project show had to be made to fill in. So I made some hand-drawn maps and I made up a language for the cartouches on the map. And I have little kings and queens and flowers in the corners. And I made 3 sets of those and sold all 3 sets to a person who collects maps. So that was kind of a funny aside. So here we have the fact that I worked within the budget and they gave me a bonus. And I know a lot of artists won't take commission work because they don't want to be tied down to the buyers, the client's vision of the work, but they let me have free rein. And I got to explore lots of techniques, and I got several other commissions because of this. I also sold half the work in the show. So it was a good deal for me all the way around. These 2 are commissions. One is in an office building in New Hyde Park, ground floor. The other one is in a home in Oyster Bay. And that's the end of the program. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and support the Guild, whatever your local guild is. Thank you very much. Bye.